This is not just another pile of old rocks. This is the smoking gun of the New Testament. For centuries, scholars laughed at the idea that a grand church was built over a humble fisherman's shack in the middle of nowhere. But the mud at Elarrage has proven the skeptics wrong. Beneath the ruins of a Byzantine basilica, they found the house. And inside the house, they found the order. It is a sentence that flips the script on the afterlife and suggests that the work of heaven is still under construction. The silence of the stones is about to speak, and it is saying something we were not prepared to hear. The lost city beneath the slime. Local legends are stubborn things. For generations, fishermen in the area told stories about carved stones that would peek out of the water during droughts. They whispered about a great house buried in the mud, hidden from the eyes of the world. So, a new team of archaeologists decided to take the risk. They were not looking for gold or jewels. They were looking for a town that the Bible mentions more than almost any other, yet one that had completely vanished from the face of the earth. The dig started in the brutal heat of summer. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and decaying plants. It was not glamorous work. It was a slog. The team had to use heavy pumps to keep the lake water from flooding their trenches. Every time they dug down a foot, the water tried to reclaim the hole. It was like the land itself was trying to keep a secret, fighting back against the intruders. For the first few weeks, it looked like the skeptics were right. They found plenty of mud, some scattered Roman pottery, and a whole lot of nothing. Morale was getting low. The heat was oppressive, and the bugs were relentless. But then, a volunteer's tool hit something that made a different sound.
Oh,
Oh,
yes, look at this black mosaic right here. This is the inscription.
Yep.
Oh my word.
It was not the dull thud of packed dirt. It was the sharp clink of metal hitting stone. They cleared the area by hand, scraping away layers of gray silt. Slowly, a line appeared, then a corner, then a wall. It was not just a pile of rocks. It was a structure with perfect 90-degree angles. As they widened the hole, the sheer size of the thing became obvious. This was not a fisherman's hut. It was huge. The walls were thick, built to last forever. As they went deeper, they found the distinct curve of an apse, the semicircular area where the altar sits in a church. But this was not just any church. The layout was grand, complex, and incredibly old. And get this, the location was exactly where ancient pilgrims said the house of Peter stood. For years, historians laughed at the idea. They said the pilgrims were just tourists who got lost. They said the real site was miles away on a dry hill. But the mud at Elarrage was telling a different story. As the team washed away the grime of 15 centuries, colors began to emerge from the floor. Reds, blues, yellows, a mosaic. The preservation was shocking. The mud, which everyone thought would destroy the ruins, had actually sealed them like a time capsule. It protected the floor from looters, from weather, and from the boots of marching armies. But the real shock was not the building. It was what they found tangled in the geometric patterns of the floor. It was a message, a text that seemed to be speaking directly to them from the year 500. But before they could decode it, they had to understand what laid beneath the floorboards. The ghost town that Jesus cursed. To understand why this mosaic matters, you have to understand where it was found. This is not Jerusalem or Nazareth. This is Bethsaida. If you know your Bible, that name should ring a bell. It was the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. It was the place where Jesus healed a blind man and fed the 5,000. It was essentially the headquarters of the apostolic mission. But here is the deal. Bethsaida is famous for one other thing. It is one of the 3 cities that Jesus actually cursed. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus looks at Bethsaida and says, "Woe to you." He condemned the city because despite all the miracles he performed there, the people did not change their ways. He predicted that it would be brought down to Hades. And historically, that is kind of what happened. By the 4th century, Bethsaida was a ghost town. It fell off the maps. Roman historians stopped mentioning it. It was as if the earth opened up and swallowed it whole. For nearly 2,000 years, nobody could agree on where it was. 2 main sites fought for the title. One was a place called Et Tel, a rocky mound way up in the hills. It had great ruins, but it was too far from the water to be a fishing village. The other candidate was Elarrage, the swampy spot where our team was digging. The debate was fierce. Careers were built on proving one site was the real deal. But the discovery of this church changed the game completely. As the archaeologists dug beneath the Byzantine floor, they hit a layer of demolition. Beneath the church, there were Roman-era houses. And not just any houses. These were the homes of fishermen. They found lead weights for nets, fishing hooks, and coins from the 1st century. This was the smoking gun. This was a fishing village that was active exactly when Jesus was alive. But there is a twist. The way the church was built tells a story of obsession. The Byzantine builders did not just plop the church anywhere. They carefully centered the church directly over the remains of one specific house. Why would they do that? In the ancient world, you did not build a massive basilica over a random fisherman's shack unless that shack meant something. The architects of the 5th century went to extreme lengths to preserve this specific spot. They built a wall around the original room. They treated the dirt floor of the old house as a holy relic. Everything pointed to one conclusion. The builders believed with absolute certainty that they were building on top of the actual home of Peter. Now, skeptics might say, well, maybe they were just guessing.
The 2,000-year-old Galilee boat from the time of Jesus on display at the Egal Alon Museum at Kibbutz Ginnasar on the shores of Galilee.
But ancient memory was better than we give it credit for. People did not have digital maps. They had oral tradition. Grandfathers took grandsons to the site and said, that is where the rock of the church lived. The discovery at Elarrage suggests that despite the curse and the disappearance of the city, a small group of believers stayed behind. They kept the location secret. They kept the memory alive. They guarded the site until the empire became Christian and they could build a monument. But the monument was not just a memorial. It was a vault. And inside that vault, they locked away a sentence that brings us back to the very moment Jesus spoke to his followers. It is not that simple, though, because what they wrote on the floor was not a verse you can find in your Sunday school book. Decoding the Byzantine secret. Let's go back to that mosaic. As the conservators cleaned off the centuries of grime, the Greek letters started to pop. The team gathered around, cameras clicking, hearts racing. They called in an expert in ancient Greek to translate it on the spot. The inscription begins with a dedication to a bishop, which is standard stuff. But then it drops the hammer. It refers to Peter. But it does not just call him Peter. It calls him the chief and commander of the heavenly apostles. Now that is a loaded title. In the world of theology, words matter. The specific Greek words used here are powerful. They suggest a hierarchy. They suggest that as early as the 5th century, right here in the boondocks of Galilee, people viewed Peter not just as a disciple, but as the supreme leader. This plays right into the biggest argument in Christian history, the authority of the Pope. The Catholic Church bases its authority on the idea that Peter was the first pope, the rock on which the church was built. Protestant traditions often argue that Peter was just a leader among equals. But here, buried in the mud of Peter's own hometown, is a text that supports the supreme commander theory. It shows that the local Christians, the people who lived where Peter lived, saw him as the boss. And get this, the inscription also mentions him as the key bearer. This refers to the famous verse where Jesus gives Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. But the mosaic does not stop at the standard verse. This is where things get wild. The team noticed that the inscription was not just a block of text, it was surrounded by a medallion, a circular border. And inside that border, there were fainter letters, smaller, harder to read. They looked like they had been worn down by thousands of feet walking over them. Or perhaps they were carved lighter on purpose. The naked eye could barely see them. So, the team brought in high-tech imaging gear. They used infrared scanners to look through the dirt and the wear. What appeared on the screen made everyone in the tent go quiet. It was a continuation of the sentence, a quote. It was framed as a direct speech from the Lord to his disciple. Most ancient churches have Bible verses on the walls or floors. That is normal. But this text did not match the standard manuscripts. It was a variation, a riff. Or maybe it was the original version that got edited out later. the atmosphere on the dig site shifted. They were not just looking at art anymore. They were looking at a transcript of a conversation that happened 2,000 years ago, just a few yards from where they were standing.
I mean, look at this. It's extraordinary. The entire inscription is here.
The words were personal, intimate, and they hinted at a cosmic job description that we have never heard before: the architecture of the afterlife. The infrared images were processed, and the linguists went to work. They pieced together the fragmented letters from the hidden ring of the mosaic. The reconstructed sentence read something like this: "Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens." Let that sink in for a second. Guard my house. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells Peter to feed my sheep. In Matthew, he tells him he is the rock. But nowhere in the canonized New Testament does Jesus tell Peter to guard my house. And then the second part, "For I go to prepare the heavens." We know the verse where Jesus says, "I go to prepare a place for you." That is in John chapter 14. But this is different. This suggests a division of labor. Jesus is handling the architecture of the next world, and he is leaving Peter as the security guard of the physical world. Why does this matter? Because it implies that the house is not just a metaphor for the church. It might refer to the actual physical building they were standing on. Remember, this church was built over a house, Peter's house. What if the tradition here was not just that Peter lived here? What if the tradition was that Jesus specifically told Peter, "Stay here, guard this spot"? This is the anchor point. This aligns with something scholars call the agrapha. These are the sayings of Jesus that are found in ancient writings but are not in the Bible. There are dozens of them. Some are weird, some are profound, but finding one carved into the floor of a major pilgrimage site gives it a huge amount of credibility. It suggests that the people of Bethsaida remembered something the gospel writers skipped. The phrase "guard my house" changes the vibe of Peter's role. It makes him a protector, a sentinel. It is less about administration and more about defense. Defense against what? Well, that is where the speculation starts. But historically, early Christians believed that holy sites were battlegrounds. They believed that demons hated these spots. By telling Peter to guard the house, Jesus might have been assigning him a spiritual duty that went far beyond preaching. The discovery also bridges the gap between the man and the myth. It grounds the story. It turns the keys of heaven into something tangible. You need keys to guard a house. Basically, this mosaic suggests that the early church viewed this location, this specific patch of mud in Galilee, as the embassy of heaven on earth. And Peter was the ambassador who was told to hold the fort until the boss came back. But there is another layer to this, a layer that touches on the mystical, preparing the heavens. So here is the real question. If Jesus gave Peter secret instructions that never made it into the Bible, how many other commands are we missing? Does this change how you see the apostles? Or is it just a beautiful old floor? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of history, smash that like button and subscribe. We are digging up new secrets every week, and trust me, you do not want to miss what we find next. Thanks for watching.